This Wednesday, September 20th at 7:30 a.m. First discussion item is Key Bank parking lot lease. And that's
Yeah, so I was approached by the leaseholder, Key Bank, to see if we're interested in entering into a letter of intent, non-binding letter, that basically says, hey, when their lease is up in 2021, that they want to extend it out for another 20 years. So we had legal counsel look at it, and she recommends that we don't enter it right now.
Our typical lease is 5 years with a 5-year option, and they're in their 5-year option right now, and I don't know why we would want to, for $100 more than we're getting right now, extend this for 20 years.
right.
And I question, I've kind of highlighted the map, they're leasing all of this. Mm-hmm. This is our street. They aren't leasing this any longer because this we approved at Turner Park. I'm spun around here.
Yeah, because this is Key Bank.
Yes. Okay. Here we go.
This doesn't go down.
Yeah. So
this is.
Well, I think what we really should be leasing them is that for their parking.
Because the rest is right away.
Is right of way.
Publicly traveled.
And the rub to that is we're going to have to start maintaining this, but we don't know what the future of West Bay Center holds, and
Right.
why would we want to give this to these guys for 20 years?
Yeah,
So,
we might need it.
I mean, there's just too many unknowns, and there's still 5 years left on this lease. Well, let's talk in 5 years and see what.
My
the
other
future holds.
question is are there any rules about the city encumbering assets for that long? For 20 years or
There is certain
an
rules.
extensive 10 years or something?
There is a rule, I know that once this lease is up, since it has been more than 10 years for the last appraisal, we're required to get an appraisal. So, and there's certain statutes that says you can only do no more than 20 years, 10 years, you're allowed a couple renewal options.
Right.
Legal counsel would
It's 5 and 5.
break that down for sure, but
And our practice is 5 and 5.
Right.
I don't know of any. We've got a number of leases out there, and I don't know of any 20-year leases. Do you, Mark? It's
No.
5. We do 5 and 5, and then at 10 years, because at 10 years we have to have an appraisal done.
yeah.
So I would recommend we write a nice letter. Thank you for your offer, but
thanks.
we'll talk in 5 years. Do we want to jump to this KPUD?
Oh, don't let me mess up your
We
agenda.
got a long agenda.
Yeah, we can go ahead and jump to KPUD.
Okay, great. We have a customer, and when I say customer from KPD's point of view, our customer is actually 5th Street Hilltop Partners. That's the ISP or reseller on our network, and they have a customer who's actually off of Bethel Avenue. It's 691 Bethel Avenue. I believe they might be a tax or auditor or something of that nature. It really doesn't matter to us. We're just transport for them. The problem is our fiber's on Mitchell. We serve the high school, of course, right off of Mitchell there, but we don't cross over to Bethel at that point. And it looks like the cheapest, most efficient build for us would be to actually cross, and the lot, and get back to there, the lot here, and I don't know if you need the whole account number, but it's ending in 2009 on the account number. And it looks like it's owned by the city. And that would be, without having to go all the way down to the next intersection, run around, and then back up Bethel. For us, that would be the most efficient way. And we could also talk to whoever the cell tower owner is there as well. And possibly get another connection there.
Mark, this looks like it's pretty close. To me, it looks like it's pretty close to that property. Or we abandoned something with the guy that owned the building down below.
Well, we have the right. It's the unopened right of way. So Rose owns.
That's way down here.
Yeah, he's purchased all this, and he's been buying vacated
it's down
property.
here. I
It's
was
further
thinking it was
north.
up here. Okay, so this is that.
This is south.
This is that dirt lot
This is
Okay.
this is going into the back of something Rebecca McWire.
Okay.
What's
Okay.
the
I was
slope
too
there,
far.
though? You guys going to be able to trench down that slope?
Yeah, we are. Actually, what we're going to do is, well, there's two options. The option A would be what we call a directional drill. And so it's really just setting up the drill up on the top on Mitchell and then actually boring under, and then we'll pop up right at the edge of their asphalt.
Setting the mole down, basically.
Exactly. It's a little different than like a whole hog. It's actually a drill. It's a pretty impressive piece of equipment. You can steer it, basically. The other option would be we'd have to set a pole, but I don't know why we'd want to do that on a lot that we're not sure what your plans are with.
Yeah, we
Probably don't want
have an
poles.
undergrounding ordinance that wouldn't let you do that.
Okay, well there you go. So yeah.
Right. My only
planning.
Yeah, my only concern is, I think we picked this property up as part of one of those ULID 1. I tried to go back into the tax history to see how we ended up with this property. It's pretty much steep slope. I don't know if we're ever going to need it, but at the same time, if we were to put an easement across it, we're going to encumber the property for future use.
That was
So-
my observation as well. Would you want to perhaps adjust it so it goes along the sides of the property?
We can, and again, I'm no surveyor. When we did the site walk, I just had a real hard time trying to figure out these two homes, or this isn't a home, but whatever these.
Yeah, at the top.
Yeah, these buildings.
There's
That is the cell tower. So there's the buildings here. I just had a real hard time trying to see
Public Works.
what type of room I had between that cell tower fence line and that. But the way we do it is really no problem to me. I drew it that way, and I realized when I drew it, we're basically cutting diagonal across the property. That's not really a very attractive way to do it. But if we can do it this way, that's
right here.
Oh yeah, exactly. Whatever way we want, and then just come back up. It really
line
doesn't.
runs all along.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter to us.
So why don't we get a proposal back where this? So because we're going to need a legal description for the.
Right. Yeah, you're going to have
You're
to
sure
have
it's right,
somebody
it's
write a
right
leer.
It will be again. It really looked. When I was standing there, it looked a little iffy where these buildings were and where that fence line was.
But you could come down this side.
Oh, absolutely.
And come over.
Yeah,
so that
absolutely.
you're not bisecting the piece of property.
Yeah, that's my only concern is, again, I don't know if we're ever going to need it, but we could have it, that could be, the upper portion could be the
Yeah, you
shop,
could. He's not sure
a
that you can go
sand
underneath there.
holding location. I just don't want to,
Oh,
For sure, yeah,
And
I get it.
Farmly,
I get it.
equipment
Yeah.
shack is there.
I see.
elevators now.
So he'd be,
All right.
he'd be going right through there.
Right.
Staff should be whole.
Yeah, that's my only fear. I didn't want to.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't think it matters which end.
It really doesn't to us, honestly. I mean, the build's the build.
Yeah, I know it's, much easier, especially if you're doing like a directional board, just go.
Is this the
Yeah.
building you're trying to get to?
That is the building we're trying to get to. Yeah. So the plan is, and as we discussed, it really doesn't matter. We can come down here, we can come up here, and do down. Really,
Right.
once we hit the pavement, we'll do what's called a sneaker trench.
Does it make sense when you tie into this building to get, since they're wanting service, to get an easement from them and bring this fiber out to Bethel? So
Absolutely, read my mind. Yeah, that's part of the attractiveness of this one. For our point, not only are we able to serve a customer, but at the same time, it kind of gives us a sneaky path onto Bethel.
But your map is showing only going to the back of the building. Can you make sure you guys get an easement to the front?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Property.
I just didn't want to confuse for the purpose of this meeting the entire plan. But yeah, that is the plan.
What about here along this unopened right of way where you don't have to worry about
Yeah,
utilities from the
I'm okay
cell
with that,
tower?
and I'm no surveyor, so
Right.
when I was out there, it just that really didn't look.
It's needed there, except for
That looked like someone's driveway to me or something. It didn't look like.
That's right away.
Okay, yeah.
It's just the old platted, unopened right of way. But I think we have to. I guess I showed. This is the utility map. So our sewer is running up. So it's north of the attorneys where we have that sewer line that we just worked on last year. So if you were to come up through there, you would actually have to do locates because we do have.
Oh, we'd have to do locates either way. Anytime we open the ground.
But you wouldn't need it. You wouldn't need.
Wouldn't need an easement
Except
except for
for
this very end part here where you cross that little tiny triangular piece.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you got these unopened rights of way. So yeah, I think you go to a Reed Muller or Norm Olson or something like that that has this, and they can go out and
Right,
like
right,
the
right.
legal, they can find the corners,
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, and your sewer's going to be like 10 feet deep anyway. There's no way we're going.
Yeah,
it's on the
yeah, but
other
you don't
side
want
of
to be
the
right
yard.
on top of it.
No, no, no.
So we-
Either, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
All
okay,
right.
so next steps, and I just want something to tell the reseller for a timeline, basically. So next steps for me would be
Determining whether you're going to go down this right of way, which you don't need anything from us,
okay.
or determining where it is you're going to go down one side or the other, and having Reed draw up a legal description
You might need a little tiny easement, right?
from us.
Yeah.
On that tip.
On that tip.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I guess the question is going to be, it sounds like the committee feels comfortable moving forward as long as it's not diagonal
Yeah.
encumbering the property,
think we
Okay.
and that you provide a legal description. So do you want it to come back to
No.
here? So if it's just at this point, so just work through my office.
Got it. So I'll have my person draw up
And
the
then
legal
I'll
description, right?
I'll work with Brandy and the mayor, and
Just
we'll.
check and balance that it checks those two boxes. And
Great.
Okay.
No problem. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I was telling him I was a little worried when I showed up. I'm glad I caught you over there at the office. I'm like, well, the door says this place doesn't open till 8. I've got a meeting at 7:30. I don't know how that logistically works out, but awesome. Thanks so much.
Well, the meetings are normally over there.
People realize.
Okay. Right.
And I guess they're here from now on.
Yep.
Okay. Great. I didn't even know this was here. This is
And
awesome.
it's good that the
Brand
there's
new?
an elevator.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second one of our meetings.
Okay. Yeah, I like it.
So if Jerry Harmon was going to come to the meeting, we'd be in trouble right now. So
Yeah, I like the table. If you ever come to our office, our table's a little ridiculous. We have this half U-shaped. It's like you're in the middle of the tribunal when we're talking to. It's pretty tough.
By design.
Yeah, I think so. All right, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you. Next item is the temporary vending site at 640 Bay Street. Masa Stone-Fired Pizza.
Yeah, so clerk's office was approached of wanting to set up a vending site, and the only one that's authorized right now is the little concrete pad in front of the library downtown by the Foot Ferry.
Do pizzas there?
So this is the proposal for him to come in.
Are there any code concerns?
Health department.
I'm assuming they'll have.
No code concerns.
is that the guy was in the Kitsap Sun the other day?
You read that?
For what?
There's a guy that makes pizzas out of a big
No, I didn't see it.
barbecue pit. Something you drive around behind his truck.
Yeah, I know who that is. Yeah.
Sounds like it is.
He's a retired guy from the shipyard and makes those and sells those units. That looks like a beverage.
No, yeah, we
golf
allow
course.
hot dog. This is a site in our code that allows for vendors. I think once I saw a hot dog vendor down there.
So where's he going to put it at?
He's got a little.
640 Bay Street.
Yeah. Is
In
that
little
the trailer
gravel
then? Is
parking
where
lot.
he's talking about? Up
Oh,
there?
he's going to park in there.
Yeah.
Oh, in our lot, gravel lot?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've had them down by the ferry terminal before, but
Right, and that's the only authorized site
Oh,
that
I
I'm
see.
aware
Look
of.
at that, right.
So I'm bringing it
Little
before
trailer here
the
and
committee.
picnic tables and umbrellas.
Right. I mean, it used to be a restaurant. We've made it. We anticipated potentially doing this on an interim basis. I don't think we looked at something like this.
my only concern would be 3 to 6 months from now, somebody. So if we sell this piece of property or develop this piece of property, how do we get out of this?
So the temporary vendor code only allows them to vend no more than 3 months, and then they have to come back and renew it. So, or you can do month to month. We can say it's okay, but you can only do it month to month.
I'd be supportive of 3 months.
Did
Give
they-
them some stability.
Yeah, my question is, did they consider the lot between Myries and the public market?
Well, they'd have to lease that month from Monsoor versus getting a permit from us.
Yeah, and I think we charge $20 a day or $200 a month. I don't know what on sewer was, but it's.
Cool.
When does he want to start doing this?
He didn't say, but I would assume as soon as we give him the okay, within probably a week or two.
Outdoor restaurant in November is just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Outdoor?
Well,
It must be good pizza.
Based on it's that Sun article, people will be flocking down there. So.
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty good. He's got
Want to interfere with his motivations, it's great.
do we want to remove our picnic tables from down there if he's gonna? No? We have two. Okay.
People down there, great.
We got a tiny home they can shack up in down there.
Maybe so that his tables are distinguished from ours, because his are going to be largely for people eating pizza, right? Maybe we can pull ours to the front a little bit for people that want to hang out there that don't eat pizza.
I mean, we can. I mean, I don't think we need to do it.
Yeah.
In the, I'm assuming there's some sort of agreement we have with him. And do we make provisions for garbage service in that? Because the city shouldn't incur any other expense, and he should be, does he need a Santa can there? Do we have any, any needs like that?
We didn't, with the hot dog vendor, we just have them take care of their own trash.
And I think the code says, at least they have to clean up their site, they can't leave any noise.
We have a
behind.
garbage can down there, so let's just make sure that
Where's he pulling power from for all of his lights?
He's self-sustained. He's just driving
It's a
around.
mobile unit.
If it's a generator, I would just caution us that we should probably have some hours, because we have a residence right next door.
My understanding, if it's the same guy, this is a wood-fired pizza pit.
Okay.
Or how's he pulling power? He's
got
proposing all
string
these
lights.
string lights all over this whole area. How's he running extension
I
cords?
think didn't we put in power down there on the bullards or something?
no.
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 No, he's going to have to be using the generator if he's got lights. Because we're
I'll
not,
ask
we're
him.
not
Can he get like temporary PSE?
Ask if it's a muffled system or enclosed.
Yeah.
Currently low.
I think he just needs to use the generator because we don't want to get into. I mean, they have these generators, you can't even hear them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
not.
that would be my concern, because there's a residence above Lolly Mays, and he'd be right next door to that. So he's either going to have, stop at 10 or, whatever our noise ordinance
Does he have to,
is.
to run all those lights, is he going to have to deal with the county or us for electrical inspection or anything?
Not with county.
City?
That'd be LNI.
And how's he going to hook them up? I mean, he's going to have poles. He's going to have some sort of an investment into
you
this
can't string
property.
20 extension cords around that place.
I do know that when the vending businesses set up, they have to file through LNI a temporary vendor license, and it's pretty detailed. I mean, they have to give them a map, they have to give them everything. So, and we require that we see at least a copy of that or make a copy for our
We've
records
got
that they've got
code
the
enforcement,
approval.
building inspector, and
Great.
LNI.
Yeah, maybe, and what she just said is perfect.
Yeah.
Just make sure you prepare us
He's
with
gonna
your
have-
electrical plan and your whatever.
So your concern back was about noise, and you said 10 o'clock. But if noise wasn't an issue, he could stay open later and service.
Well, I don't know. There's some rules, because the
I think
bands
the
can only
vending-
play outside for so long, and then they.
And I think there's limitations on how long and when they can vend. I think they have to stop at 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock at
Okay.
night, and they can't open back up until 9 in the morning or something like that. But I'll double check our section of the code.
Yeah, no, I was just concerned about the neighbors.
And noise, yeah.
Yeah, the noise for the people that live above Lolly Mays.
All right, anything else on that? Street vacation, Rockwell.
Okay. So we have.
You closed on the pocket park.
And we're closing on the easement.
That's
You
what
closed
this
on the
is.
easement.
Closed on the easement first.
Yeah, you had to do that first.
We did.
There was something about some papers got lost. In
No,
there.
I got found. Yeah, trust me. It was a cluster on
And that was
Friday.
found.
We had to close on that
We have to
first.
go to Bellingham to sign it.
No, they'd be found in Seattle. They were in Seattle for 3 days, and they shouldn't have been.
So the city received two street vacations regarding the Marley Apartments. So the first one is in front of the Marley Apartments on Bay Street, and then the other one is adjacent to what we just acquired from Comfort Inn, adjacent to the Marley Apartments parking, I think is how that's
Well,
on the end.
The one at the Marley is the building that
The Rockwell one.
The building that was built in 1961 was built 20 feet in the right of way. So as part of the Bay Street pedestrian pathway project, even though our pathway goes past that building, we're required under the federal funding laws that we have to resolve any encroachments along our alignment. And so the Marley apartment encroachment could have been resolved one of two ways. Either they would have had to move the building out of the right of way, or initially they would have been dealing with the state. We got a letter from the state where they looked at it and they determined that they weren't going to invoke their jurisdiction. They really weren't bothered about this encroachment, and they were leaving it up to the city to determine whether it was surplus or not. So then we went through our city process. So the money that will come from the purchase of that will come to the city, not to the state. Other areas along 166, the money actually has to go to the state. But in this particular case, it's coming to us and will go back into our transportation fund. The Rockwell piece was, and the best I can tell, when the Holiday Inn was originally built, it looks like that project vacated the easterly half of Rockwell. Because if you look at across the street and you look at the Rockwell right-of-way and then you go north, the east half of Rockwell north of Bay Street had been vacated. And I think that happened when they built the original Holiday Inn. And so that left the west half of that right-of-way that they've been using solely for their purpose. Now that we're doing our RCO park, we've got 3 parking spaces that, based on our plan, are down here. And so that 60 feet is based on, I was working with Ann Schnitzer, the owner, and working with our site plan to make sure that we have room for those 3 parking spaces, and then we have access through to get to those parking spaces. And then they'll use that 60 feet to compensate, even though they were compensated financially for the loss of one marginal parking stall, which when our pathway project goes in front of their entry, because of the grade differences, we have to rebuild their entrance, and they have their most southerly parking stall is not usable anymore. So they were compensated $50,000 for that. So they're going to, in essence, then now have permanent parking in that 60 feet.
So based on that, I got the 2 applications, one for Rockwell, one for Bay Street. So Bay Street's pretty straightforward. The petitioner's going to be Marley Apartments. They provided us a legal description. They pay for the application fee, and that's slated for next week's agenda.
And they've used we did the appraisal as part of our federal process. They were able to use that valuation, I think it's $20 a square foot, the appraised value for the purchase.
So for the Rockwell Street vacation, when the attorney looked at it, because it is adjacent to a waterfront, if the petitioner, being Marley Apartments, moves forward as the petitioner, then the city has to compile an inventory of right-of-ways within the city that butts the same body of water and that is abutted by the street or alley sought to be vacated. The city also has to conduct a study to determine if the streets and alleys to be vacated is suitable for the city. And so that was one option that they can bring forward. They can do it that way, which felt that it was probably more cumbersome on staff to present it that way. So if the city council presents the street vacation, then there's no obligation to do that. What we do have to provide to the council is some points, that says the history of it, if there's any utility, what we're going to do with the property, and then staff's recommendation. And so legal's counsel and staff's recommendation is to bring this forward at next week's council meeting, having the council declare the street vacation.
So the only part we're vacating is the Xed part here.
It's just the north 60. It's from the ordinary high water mark back 60 feet. It's where they're parking now.
And this is no different than what was
Yeah.
presented to us a couple months ago conceptually when we were talking about the park development.
Yeah, they've been parking there for years.
Yeah.
For my own curiosity, the 50,000 that they got for the stall, is that also based on a guided payout structure for
Yeah, it was part
parking
of-
spaces?
Right, so it was for a temporary construction easement.
Okay.
Because so their driveway is steep like this. The new driveway will kind of go like that, so it just extends further in, and it makes that parking stall unable to get into it. And so through a temporary construction easement, we'll be able to pave that, and it'll render that stall inaccessible. And so the just compensation through the appraisal through Haas was the 50,000. So we've paid an additional 50,000 that we really didn't anticipate, but with the purchase of this, the purchase of the encroach, that money will go back into that same pot. So
You know what the square feet in here is, roughly? It says 60 feet by
30 feet.
900 times 20.
I don't have it right now, but I can make
It's a
sure
good
it's
deal.
on the
We get
staff
50 grand
report.
for one stall, and we get 18 for.
Well, but we also going to get this
1,800 square feet.
this 20 feet by, I can't remember, 20 by 40.
Yeah, where's the other vacation?
The front tip of the, it's not highlighted, but it's the front tip of the building there.
Okay,
The building was built out on the street right away.
yeah.
Here's the street vacation for the Bay Street. It's that blue
Okay.
strip there.
And Mark, you were saying the width of Rockwell here is 30, right?
Right, the half width.
And the other half. So did we just buy back what we previously vacated?
Well, I'm assuming if you look
It's
at
a federal process, it all makes sense.
well, it's like if you look at, I didn't go back into you would be able to look at the Holiday Inn shoreline. There had, when you look at the plat map, it's the easterly half of Rockwell north of Bay Street had been vacated. I assume that happened with Holiday Inn because the grass area that we purchased was going to be a restaurant originally. They were going to do a hotel and a restaurant. So if you go back in that file, I'd be pretty confident that there was a vacation associated with that.
So staff will bring this forward. Is it consensus? Okay.
Just thankful we're gonna get this done and what we did on this pathway.
That'll be nice. Yes. That'll be nice. Nice little beach area there. All right, Depot Street.
Okay, so staff was approached again for a street vacation. And so this is for Depot Street, which is adjacent to Bay Street. And so when we looked into it and the map that was provided, there was some question as if it was already vacated or not. And so when I looked into it, just the first 15 feet of the right-of-way was vacated, and that happened prior to it being annexed into the city. So I'm not quite sure exactly when it was vacated, but it was part of the vacation when the city annexed in 1960. And so the next question is, there was a second street vacation in the 70s, and it appeared that that part was vacated as well. And so when it went to the council in 1977, the council actually did adopt and approve the street vacation. However, because of the applicant, the adjacent property of the applicant did not support the street vacation, and the council rescinded it at the very next meeting, so which made the remainder of the street vacation not valid. So it's still an active right-of-way, which based on the records that I was able to find, it's about 20 feet that is still right-of-way. So after that, then we look to see if the non-user statute applies, which means that if the plat was vacated prior to 1904, I think is the
You mean
year.
it was platted, it's 1909, I think.
So 1909, yeah. So if it's platted before 1909, when the statute proviso was added, then and the land has
It was originally in the county, or
it has to be originally in the county, when it was platted, and it has to remain in the county and the right-of-way has not been opened or used by pedestrian or vehicle for the first 5 years after it was platted. So if it was not used, then it's vacated by lapse of time, which means that the property is owned by the adjacent property owners and is not a right-of-way, which is owned by the city.
Well, I guess for clarification, owners have fee simple ownership
Right.
all the time. It's just whether or not the requirement to provide public access is in place
Right.
for a right of way.
Right. Well, and yeah, that, yes. So my understanding of the non-user statute is it is not a right-of-way. It was platted as a right-of-way. It was never used as a right-of-way the first year that it was platted, and it remained in the county, then it's no longer a right-of-way. It's land.
But bottom line, this would be supported, right, by both. There's no neighborly objections like there once was, right?
Because it's vacated by lapse of time, there's no
Nothing negative.
requirement for them to buy up on it.
And so this is more of a cleanup, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the petitioner has to follow some steps, so it's going to be probably 4 to 6 weeks before it's going to be brought before you. But I just wanted to give you the heads up that it's there. We're not going to see any compensation because it's not. They're not purchasing the right away; they already own it. We're just transferring it over through the county through that process, and
Now
then
they'll pay taxes on it.
right.
And then $2. And he's talked about this is Mr. Smith's property is on one side, and he's apparently looking at buying the one next door and potentially redeveloping both sites.
So this one's a little bit of a different street vacation that you'll see compared to the two that are going before next week. Well, even that's a little bit different, but anyways.
I would just comment that I'm glad Mr. Smith's doing his homework on the front side.
Amen.
Okay. Then the next item is the active club complaint.
Is this building close to falling down?
What building is it?
So the Active Club building, which is at Kendall and Tacoma,
By Gibbons.
it's where the South Kitsap Pee-wees lease out the bottom, and then the upper floor. So the building was given to the city in 1960 something for children, for use of use. Back in 2009 or 10, when I first came here, we had a whole big issue of animals, and the groups within using the facility were griping and complaining and fighting. And then so this is a deja vu for me. We came back, we changed the code, we tightened things up, we didn't allow animals. They had like the fur, fin, and feathers, and 4-H was in there at the same time with the quilters, and birds. The parrot club was flying around and not cleaning up their bird droppings. And so we kind of had this moment in time where we looked and we strengthened whatever the code was, whatever the agreements were. And so now fast forward 7 years, 8 years, and we're coming back up to this crescendo of the groups are fighting again constantly. You've got people so AA dominates the facilities. Nobody else has a chance to use them. They leave the windows open. They smoke outside the front door. They don't clean up the trash. They put up their posters. But the other people that use it complain constantly. And now we're having this issue with the keys are being lost again. And they're saying, we don't have the keys, but we know they do. So let me look through the...
I thought I heard that AA was moving into the Gibbons building.
I wish they were, because they were
So
obviously...
that's a rumor then?
They're
I know
too
that.
expensive. The counny charges.
Yeah.
We only charge
It's like
$20, $30. I
Oh,
mean,
maybe
it's like
Well, if this is supposed to be used for youth, maybe we
Well,
need to have a less expensive fee for youth activities, and these other uses need to pay something more.
Yeah,
so. We did look on the deed, and so there was comments in the minutes stating that they were going to donate it as long as it was used for youth or senior activities. When it was recorded on the deed, when the deed was recorded, it was not listed on the deed. So the city can basically according to the deed, do whatever they want, but I'm sure,
I mean, this is a tough
Minutes,
deal
yeah.
because, I mean, AA serves an extremely useful purpose, and I have now firsthand knowledge of, the benefits of that with some family issues I'm going through. So I see the need, but at the same time, that group, because they have AA and NA that uses that facility, and those groups do not mesh very well with the other groups, the quilters and the, you've got two very opposing uses that still are involved. And so the reason I brought this forward is, this is just kind of, and I don't know if we're going to do anything about it. This is more, I just wanted to bring it back to the city's attention that Public Works is spending a lot of time managing the infighting. And they're getting very frustrated that, again, it's constant complaints. And so I don't know if there's a better way to have somebody else manage it, or, I don't know.
I'm sure we've all seen agreements where if you don't clean up after yourself, there's additional charges that are levied against you. I mean,
yeah, that's not in our current.
Well, I mean,
But the
should
problem
we
is
do that?
they use that up until, like midnight, and we have our janitor that comes in and she's having concerns that they're using all her supplies,
Right.
and then we had a moment in time when AA and NA were saying that our janitor wasn't keeping things clean. So unless we have somebody there that's monitoring it, there's like, it's almost like it's like hearsay. It's like they'll say, well, no, it was dirty when we got here. The group before us, because they're all day long they're rented out to different groups. Room 1 is primarily AA. So I think it would be very difficult unless we had somebody there. That's an option. Maybe we hire somebody it's a full-time on-site facilities manager, that's managing all this. But
A few years ago, we had flooding in the basement, and Pee-wee's took care of that, didn't they?
yeah,
Because the basement is basically Pee-wee's.
yeah, it's leased out to them.
Yeah, and then the top part is where we have these organizations come in.
Yeah, the Pee-wees were dealing with some flooding and rodent issues, and because they need that space, they said, hey, we'll make the necessary repairs, and we're not going to ask the city, because we had basically, I think we got an estimate of like $60,000, and we said, look, we'll just terminate the lease. And
Can we move the lease rate up anytime soon? I mean,
It's by order. It's a user fee. So if we're incurring additional janitorial expenses, I mean,
but it's part of its janitorial, but the other issues. So if you go in there, we've put up over the 10 years that I've been here, we got so many signs in there. Don't pour coffee grounds in the drinking fountain. Don't, it's everywhere, because everything that's ever come up as an issue, we've
Is it the
signed.
same 3 or 4 groups that are using this?
Yeah, and they've
So we
never
require
got
them to come to a meeting, and we're going to have a sit down, and we're going to go through these rules. We could have them sign something and let them know. Look, if this continues, we're going to make drastic changes. We're not going to allow this to happen anymore.
And that's
So
what we did.
Here's your last and final warning.
Yeah, at the last moment in time, that's what we did.
I mean,
long
this
ago
is a
was that?
strong letter.
Yeah. So I mean,
And I like the idea of a clean. And even if we it's difficult to enforce.
Right.
If we impose a cleaning fee.
well, then they can't re-rent it until that's paid in full. So then they've basically evicted themselves.
So an additional 20 on each activity,
Or just to clean, if
for example.
if the janitors, I mean, the janitors are representative. The janitor says it's these guys. That's the final word. And
Well, the city hall, when people use city hall, I think it's $100 deposit cleaning fee. So I don't know if you
There
guys
you go.
want to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
I know when they rent out the halls.
so
and
$100 fee if they don't.
they have to pay it at the time of. So we have one agency that uses it all the time, and we just keep that $100 for the year to keep it on file. And then we have some that want to pay it every single time they reserve it, and then we do it through the refund process. But you just.
Well, I know that these guys, they book in advance. The code allows them, so AA and NA reserve the
Book for
rooms
the
for the
year.
year. and then the other groups kind of following behind.
Yes, it's some rules, and if they're in default of those rules, then
And I have
Those
sent
privileges.
letters in the past. I've sent, I think, probably 3 different occasions I've sent stern letters to everybody, and they kind of straighten up for a while. But
yeah, we don't want to be the ones chasing them away. But if they can't follow the rules, they've chased themselves away.
okay, well, I guess we'll look at the. Can you send me the most recent rules?
Yeah.
So the last Come to Jesus meeting was 5 years ago or 7 years ago, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 7 or 8 years ago, yeah.
Well, let's have another one, see how long it lasts.
Okay.
So out of that came, we'll look at fees, maybe adjusting.
Well,
Or the
I'll
damage deposit.
Rules, damage deposit. And if
I'll
they're,
just look through the rules and see where we need to strengthen them, look where we need to ask for additional damage deposits.
Can
and
we
then
do
look-
something, because keys obviously are an issue. Can we change the locks and make them a code or something?
We can buy a lock system that will give them individual
Right, but the only
codes.
problem with that is once they have the code.
Yeah, everybody can get in any time.
Yeah, we've had issues.
Well,
where
they can if they have keys.
And they use that. Remember, they've used that. They'll have those marathons.
Wait,
we do the
you
same
would
thing
only
with
give
the key deposit.
you'd
Though. It's
only
like, look,
give
if we have to rekey the building, you're on the hook for it. So if you lose your key and it costs $500 to have the building rekeyed,
But they're saying the keys, we put the keys in the box, and we
Right.
say, well, when we open the box, it's not there.
Right. That's the problem. Is most people check them in.
So-
but
But
So
you can,
So
you
no
can
longer
give
allow that.
individual
Maybe we
codes.
don't allow them.
Right.
To,
Nope.
they've
They
got
gotta
to
hand
physically
deliver it.
turn the key in to somebody.
But the problem is that they're there at 11 p.m. to
Too bad.
midnight.
Well, they can come back in the next
Next
morning and
business
turn
day.
it in.
Yeah.
Or we can have a drop at City Hall where they.
We do.
Well, they
We
were
do,
putting
and
them
that's
in the
the problem,
utility
yeah.
box, and they're claiming that.
So they have to
well, we
hand-
put it
do
in.
hand
Yeah,
off.
I'd
So
say
again,
to hand
it's-
deliver it.
There's just a lot of time.
Well,
there.
the other thing,
That's a lot of time.
if AA is using it regularly, they're probably using it daily or 3 times a week.
They're using it 7 days a week.
The key.
Yeah, so
18
it
hours
doesn't
a
make
day.
any sense for them
They
to.
issued a key, and if they lose it, then they have to rekey the building.
And they
Their
pay the
expense,
expense, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So why do we? Yeah, if they're using it every day, why would we?
They would
keep
get
the
one
key.
key.
Well, that was part of the previous resolution was that they needed to not have the keys full time because they were going in outside of
They're
their allotted times, and so somebody would show up. They would just assume that they had room 1, and some peewee group had rented the space, and they're in there having an AA meeting, and the people come in and are like, oh, so that's why we rescinded.
Then they're in violation of the rules again, and
Right.
action will be taken.
There's what they really need to do is just we need to just sell them the building, and it just needs to be their facility.
Well, when you say that, I'm just going to say out loud that I don't think that our whole complex there is being used efficiently or adequately. I think the smaller Little League field, the Michelson field, is used well, but I think the rest of it is not used well.
Yeah, and we
Yes.
Part of it
We just
being
re-
Givens and
Well, Gibbons,
all
but
that.
no,
Other
we don't
side.
have Gibbons. Those
Oh, the other
fields
side. Okay.
and the active club.
Well, we have the fields, but the Pee-wee baseball, they have the lease, and they sublease to the Pee-wee football.
Correct.
And they
I'm
fight every
just,
year.
right, and that's an ongoing thing. So I think at some point, because we just redid that lease, but I think at some point that's a discussion that we need to have.
Well, we had that moment in time when the Boys and Girls Club was going to buy that. We were going to sell it, and they were going to remodel it and turn it into Boys and Girls Club. And
I think there's there's the political side of this because when Mark changes whatever he does, we're going to see public comment. We're going to see 15 people from AA, you know. So I think this is making you guys aware. But administratively, Mark, I think you got to figure out what's going to work.
Right.
Bring it forward, and you know.
and there'll be some political capital.
There's going to be there's going to be some political outfall from it. That these guys aren't going to be happy no matter what we do. But we've got an issue here that's eating up staff time.
And nothing's not reasonable that we're talking about.
No. So Mark needs to figure out what he needs to do administratively, and then bring this back to the. I think to the full council.
Yeah.
Unless you guys wanted it
A
at
couple
work
of
study.
security cameras so we can go back to the tape.
So, for what it's worth, back when I started with the county in 2006, there was discussions of a GUMPOD, I think they call it, Government Use Master Plan Overlay District. How's that? And then that died when Chris Gears, the administrator, left, and then the recession came on. But it might be worth approaching the county about what could we look at doing with that whole area, including Givens, because Givens is a hot mess too. I hate to see what's inside those walls.
Public Facilities District money.
So there's some, redevelopment opportunity. Maybe it's a public-private partnership with, mixed use.
Well, I looked at it on our tour at some of those lovely parks and the way those things were being used, and we leased that for like $1 a year to Little League, and they don't use that big field. That big field is only used 2 or 3 nights a week. I mean, there was a time when my kids were up there that was used 7 days a week, and it was all day Saturday and all
they
day
had the
Sunday.
Pony Colt League was
Right,
there.
and now, and now they have 2 teams that use that, and we used to have 12. So I'm going, is that the best use for this community of that facility? Things change, just like retail is changing, the way kids participate in sports is changing.
Yep.
So anyway, I just offered that as,
I think these are all good ideas.
Yep.
There.
All right. So the next, the takeaway there is we'll look at rules, damage deposit, sitting down with them, turning in the keys physically, and then other things as you come up with them.
And just take it right to the council, or you guys want to see it again?
Right to
Maybe work study.
work study. Yeah. Do not feed the birds.
I've done some research about Gull Poop.
Okay.
And this individual claims that there's some federal thing, and Carrie researched this, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture says seagull droppings should not be allowed to accumulate where someone can breathe the dust or come in physical contacts, but because the bacteria it does carry bacteria. So I called our local health district, talked. His name's escaping me right now. But anyway, the executive director over there, Bremerton doesn't allow. They've got signs on their waterfront. It isn't. They don't consider it a public health issue at all. They do consider it a nuisance. I know at the bank it was a problem because McDonald's over there, the customers would, buy French fries and stand in the parking lot and feed seagulls. So the McDonald's over there on their own, because all the neighboring businesses complained, because now we had this gigantic flock of seagulls all the time out at Bravo Terrace, nowhere near the waterfront, because people were attracting the birds. So that's what's happening along our pathway, is people are feeding the birds. We're getting additional seagulls coming, and they're crapping all over the cars.
It's not the first time I've heard that's bad for your paint.
Yeah, it is really bad for your paint. And so this is somebody that has a business down there, and their car's down there every day, and birds are pooping all over it. So it is a nuisance. It is not a public health issue. And do we want to? Washington State here, ferries has signs on their boats. Don't feed the birds.
Ivers has signs now.
Yeah, and
Oh, do they really?
Bremerton
They
had them
used
on
to
their
do
waterfront because they were having a problem with people doing the same thing. So we'd have to put something in our code and probably have a fine.
Then you got enforcement.
So what do we do about the seagull calling contest?
That was Keith Grella. He goes, but you guys do have a festival for that. I said, yeah, I know. So we'd have to exempt the seagull calling contest, I suppose, in our
If
code.
one day they could feed the seagulls.
Put your car covers on that day.
So that's the background. Do we? It is a nuisance. It is causing probably damage to people's cars down along the waterfront. Do we want to put signs on our waterfront say not to feed seagulls.
Seems like a reasonable thing to do.
I would challenge somebody that's better with wordsmithing than I am to refrain from using no and nots. How could we have a sign that's more welcoming versus do not do this and do not do that? So can we wordsmith this in a way where we're telling people not to feed the birds, but it's not so negative and connotative?
Did you know?
Please.
Please do not.
Yeah, but can we not use the word not?
I don't know. I think I'm going to defer to what
You will, yeah.
Bremerton and the ferry systems have done, and you know, I don't know.
The other part of that is when you feed a wild animal, you're teaching it
Totally.
behavior. So,
No question.
you know, you could easily say something that feeding the birds is harmful to them.
Yeah,
There you
and so
go.
and a little
I
bit
like
of an
that. That's what I'm
educational
saying.
campaign. Did you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, but
that-
do you want 3 words on a sign, or do you want a
Well, that's what I'm saying. We'll give this a little more thought. I don't have to solve it today, but I think there's a way to make a nice point without.
I think
Mark?
separately.
This is going to land in your lap.
Well, I know. I'm sitting back and thinking, it's one thing having the sign. It's
Yeah.
another
It's another
thing.
So it's
Yeah.
educationally. If I think most of the behavior would change with the sign, it's enforcing
It's
it.
a step in the right direction.
Yeah, you don't need rules to back it up. Just put the
Right.
sign up and see what happens.
I think we have. I don't think we can put a sign up.
You
I
could-
think
If you got little kids throwing half of their peanut butter jelly sandwich up, you know,
Yeah.
they're not going to get arrested for that. What you're really talking about is, so for example, the issue we had at the lady that had the bird shop on Frederick that was putting stuff out every day, and the wharf rats were coming up and all the birds. That's where that is an enforcement issue. And if you had somebody that was sitting at the park bench every day and
That's
bringing a
that's,
big bag
that's what's
of
going on down there by West Bay Center. Is somebody's, and that's what we were having going on at Bravo Terrace too. Is there was somebody that visited McDonald's every day to buy French fries to feed the birds. It was part of their daily.
So that's
routine.
really, so I think if you think about what your focal point is, who the real culprit is, again, you know, I'm on Tiger Lake and the ducks, they waddle right up to the boat in the middle of the lake because they're used to people giving them crackers and bread. You know, so that's that behavioral thing. So they're going to come if that food's available.
It won't be a cure-all, but it will be a step in the right direction.
Well, it's at least going to take care of that one individual or two individuals that are
95% of the problem.
or 95% of the problem.
And again, I wouldn't mind having one smaller sign that talks about why we don't want this. Maybe off to the side or in a corner or somewhere.
Well, maybe we've seen the pickup. So
Or
the dog
on-
do sign that we have.
One on top of
It's kind of the cute one that shows the dog, and it's like he's embarrassed because his mask. He's like, "Hey, can you pick up after me, please?" You know, we could do something along that line.
So we'll bring something back to a work study here.
Okay.
We could have like a bird, and it says,
Yeah.
"Please don't feed me; it'll make me sick."
Yeah.
Except
And then down below it says, "Do not feed the bird."
Yeah, you could have
And
it
smaller, and it's going to cite our whatever stinking code which is going to have the nasty language in it.
Do we have current nasty
Alfred
language?
Hitchcock.
No, we'll have to go to look at Bremerton's code. I think Bremerton's probably put it in his code.
Birds will come.
I like that.
I'll do a rendering.
Just for rendering. All right.
You put his face
All
on the
right.
sign.
So do you want to
yeah.
talk about zoning from last night?
Do you mind if I excuse myself from this conversation?
No, you got to
You're
stay.
free to go.
I see red, yellow, and blue maps on it.
So the maps that we brought last night, maps 4 and 5, it turns out we brought the wrong map because it didn't have a couple of the last minute changes. So I wanted to highlight a handful of properties that are different. The first of them, this is Lundberg here coming in from Bethel. This gentleman that owns this property, I guess this has been in his family for 60 or 80 years. He came in and we had proposed bringing the greenbelt further up, but he actually has a little bit of flat area splitting this parcel. And we also felt that R12 was probably a more appropriate designation for all of these areas off of Harold with the presence of a park. This is designated as a local center, and so getting a concentration of people there to support business development on Bethel and potentially some mixed-use development on Bethel would be appropriate. The other project...
Before we change that too, one of the things in our drive around with John Rose too, this could be at least from a pedestrian standpoint. This is Lund here, isn't it?
You could build a right out.
We could build a right out right here, and as this develops out, we could, improve some traffic there.
Yeah, Mark should have stayed for that part.
I know.
But the other project, we had the Riverstone plat that was Gary Anderson and Ken
Morrison.
Ken Morrison. Their plat expired, but they previously had an approval here. We feel that the back parcel definitely has a point where it slopes off. There's very little developable land, but they were very resistant to changing the zoning here. And so we actually upzoned the front portion of the property to R12, and then the back is R8, but there are some critical area constraints. And then this property here that is split, you can see the old 200-foot ribbon here. This individual was very opposed to any change to her property, despite the fact that this is the Lund Avenue Bridge and there's no access to her property. That's one of the ones that kind of makes me scratch my head and say this should probably all be greenbelt, but they felt that there's a tiny little flat spot up here where they could get a house if somehow they can find a way to get a road in.
They're pushing dirt around there, aren't they? Or is that further?
No,
further up.
that's over
Is
here.
that one? Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, this one is, if you drive over the Lund Bridge, I think the guardrail starts midway through the property for the bridge, and I don't know how you get over there. So council, could step up and say that, this really ought to be greenbelt. I would certainly be supportive of that, but,
Then what's the other one on the west side?
So
Tiny little piece.
Yeah.
that's one parcel. That whole.
This was the old ribbon, and it was split just like
Okay.
that. So it
So they
certainly
had-
doesn't make sense to leave this little piece. I think the question is, do you extend the greenbelt to the east? And they can still build a house out there because they have a sufficient amount of land, but this is preserving their right to subdivide, which implies that they're going to have to construct some sort of access.
Right.
And I don't even see how you can get a single driveway in there, much less a road at that point. So,
Zip line.
so anyway, if council wants to address that when we go to vote on this thing, you certainly could. And I think you would be justified.
What's the harm in leaving it?
Right.
I think the critical areas code protects things. It's just a funky little thing on your map that seems.
I mean, we're not changing to this. We're just leaving it alone and
Yeah.
ignoring the
That's
issue.
exactly. Let
Yeah.
sleeping dogs lie.
Well, yeah, and ultimately they're, I don't know whether the assessor looks, how closely they look at terrain and critical area constraints or access, but presumably they're paying taxes for, property that has some R4.5 zoning on it, and, doesn't hurt us, I guess.
Yeah. Helps.
Hope's a method.
So, and then like I said, the Kitsap housing, the mobile home court off of Carl Pickle is all going to R12. Anything else, Carrie, that we need to highlight here?
Why would we want to
And
change
so-
the mobile home park?
It's currently R4.5, and I think there could be some interest in redeveloping that as some other type of housing type in the future.
Well, what kind of
I
additional?
don't, that was a big deal.
That was a request from Kitsap Housing to change that.
Wow. Okay.
So,
I'm the board chair next year. You know that.
But not with the idea that additional manufactured homes would be brought in.
I think that if you wanted to replace the manufactured homes with another housing type, R12 is going to give them a density that would justify
They would have to go
redeveloping.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's.
Then the other map here is zoning map 5. So this is that mobile home court area. I think the bottom of it. The changes. These 4 properties here we had proposed going greenbelt, and they have been pushed back at the owner's request. Also, I think this property here, and so this is where you see kind of that original ribbon being left intact, whereas previously it had been proposed to kind of follow the top of the bank.
Is that Salmonberry?
This is, that's Salmonberry to the south here. This gentleman was the one who he's actually laid out a subdivision that accesses off of a private road. I think it's a tough thing to build, but is it feasible? Possibly. It's probably, even if it stays R4.5, I don't think he's going to develop even at that density. But
So
it could
that's
probably,
behind Farmer George's?
yeah, I believe so. And then this,
Steve.
this is pretty steep in here, but this gentleman came in and requested no change, and so the Planning Commission ultimately recommended no change for him. The other area, I think I mentioned these property owners here wanted to see no change, and then these two, 1 and 2 there, also, this is going to be greenbelt with R12 up along Geiger, and the idea was that if you transfer all of the development up to Geiger, you're going to have sewer in Geiger, you can pay for the Geiger improvements and do something where you have, just houses lining Geiger or potentially townhomes. They really didn't want to lose the development potential on the bottom of that hill, but the problem, of course, is down here you're pumping sewage up Blueberry. I don't ever see that being a real viable option for them, but I suppose it's possible.
Why wouldn't they go to R12?
Down below?
Mm-hmm.
This is actually a hillside. It's not as steep as further up in the creek, but this slopes off, if you're driving up Sedgwick, you go up the hill. This is that same hill. It's a 12% grade on Blueberry, and so fire can't get in there.
Okay.
You'd have to sprinkler all the houses.
Yeah.
You're going to have fire flow. And the fire department requires 2 points of entry, and this one is a dead-end road with no turnaround. And maybe they could get through here somehow, but it's a difficult area. And then these are the 3 properties. This gentleman really did not want to go R20. The upper part was going to be R12, and these 2 are R20. I think ultimately that's probably a better use of that land, but he's got a nice spread, kind of in some pretty old trees, and I think he just wants to see it stay that way as long as he's there. And
The R20 next to it, is that enough land to do?
Yeah, I think
R20?
so. The Lars Klinsland owns these 2, and he's talked to this guy as well, and they seem to be intent on seeing some development occur there. And this is also where that new road would potentially come through. And originally this piece was going to be R20, but we found out that West Coast Fitness is buying this to expand their parking because they're having parking challenges. So presumably we'd like to see the road maybe connect through on the back side of that parking lot through that R20 and provide some access to whatever gets developed there. So I think that's, the only other area, there's a change here. Thimbleberry, these are the townhomes that were approved in the county. They currently have stubs for a number of units that we don't allow, and so we have corrected that zoning so that they can actually build what the infrastructure is installed for, although there are some other challenges with that site beyond just their existing zoning issues. I think the existing housing stock there, it was initially condominiumized. Somebody bought 3 of them, is now renting them. 3 of them are individually owned, and 5 are rentals, and it's a mess as far as maintenance and the quality out there.
They're not attractive at all. I mean, it's relative deferred maintenance.
The other issue, and I can't think of the name of this street here where my mouse is. This is code enforcement land. It's a area of single-family homes that are zoned commercial, so nobody can improve anything, and they're all just sort of letting things go, waiting for somebody to come buy them out, and we're having police and code enforcement issues out there pretty regularly. And without any demand for commercial land, we're looking at that and thinking that there's really nothing is going to change there for a really long time, and nobody's going to buy up all those houses and consolidate them into one ownership anytime soon. There's much easier properties to develop. So one of the thoughts here is we get into the sub-area planning process is looking at taking this to a mixed use where you could do residential or commercial, and potentially if you have residential development there, maybe that becomes a more viable thing to clean up and make something happen out there. But I think it would have to be a pretty high density in order to justify buying out existing houses. And,
Maybe you look at that for all 4 corners.
I was thinking that, and I think that we just talked about putting Salmonberry and Bethel onto the 6-year street plan. I think whether this is a roundabout or a signal really ties into the land use that's there, and whether we're trying to make a easy to cross pedestrian intersection, or whether we're making traffic flow a priority through there. And that's one of the things that we have to analyze in our corridor study. I think the roundabout is going to move traffic better, but it also requires more right-of-way that we don't currently have. I think a 4-way signal, it's not going to move traffic as well. It's potentially more in the way of bad accidents where somebody's getting T-boned in an intersection versus the relatively minor accidents you see at a roundabout. And but it also makes pedestrian crossings much easier because traffic is stopping. So that's something we'll continue to look at. But with the commercial designation, I was hoping to talk a little bit about zoning today too, in terms of what are our next steps for getting going on revamping the zoning code. My goal would be to create a mixed-use zone that could be applied in the commercial area that would allow residential or commercial or mixed buildings, and really not be so prescriptive as we are now, where we have a mixed-use zone that it seems to imply that it has to be a mixed-use building as opposed to allowing one use or the other on a site. And then, of course, the residential densities that are allowed are so low that, development like we saw on our tour is not even allowed. So we'll look at that moving forward. Any other questions on the maps?
What is the R on some of the maps? In the circle.
Rob.
Yeah, that's his
Trademark.
His mark.
Yeah, registered.
That is a good question. I did not make the map. I'm going to ask Jim that.
It's not on all of them. It's just on some of them.
Maybe it's revised.
That's what I was thinking, but
Maybe so. I'll ask Jim. So, in terms of zoning, that was another thing I wanted to bring up. We've talked about the need to overhaul some of our zoning codes, and I think we're at the point where we need to figure out what our approach to that is going to be. And I think there's a couple of different ways that we could go, because there are things that are coming in the pipeline that we could address at more of a specific small scale, or we can continue on the path of doing more of a broad, let's build this toolbox and then apply it through sub-area planning. And so I guess I want to make sure that I'm have everybody on board with the approach of building a toolbox, and I guess my proposal would be to start working through the Planning Commission with some zoning overhauls at their next meeting.
and I'm okay with that. Can we get a taste of what that looks like before it goes to the Planning Commission?
We can, and I think what I'd like to do with this is really, I want to outline a public participation program so that the council has an understanding of how this process is going to work going forward. But my goal would be to have these tools available to us once the design standards are adopted, so that we can apply these as.
So the Planning Commission meeting's 2 weeks away. Or could you be ready for a discussion item at next week's? Otherwise, you're going to be a month out.
Well, and I had hoped to take it to the Planning Commission at the first meeting in October, and I was thinking that the comp plan would be done by then. I'd really like to finish the comp plan before I start opening up a broader discussion on zoning, and get the comp plan kind of behind us.
Is that because of resources?
It's resources, but also I don't want people jumping ahead of themselves. I want them to kind of look at what the comp plan is now without saying, hey, there's a new, we're talking about changing these zones. Could this...
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't want to scare people.
Unraveling things.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I want to say with my comment last night is I have absolutely no problem with the changes we're making in this. I'm supportive of that. I very much appreciate the public process you went through. Having listened to the public hearing, I thought it was an excellent meeting. But I would have liked this committee, which I don't usually sit on, this committee to have had an overview of what you were thinking about before we moved it onto planning. It feels like that we didn't have.
Overview and work study before.
Correct. Just make sure we're all on the same page, because it really feels to me like we've started the sub-area planning, and we haven't had any input on that. Again, I'm supportive of what we're doing. I just would have liked land use to have a little more.
I think we did present the overall work plan to the council before it went to the Planning Commission, but not the details.
But
The
not the
challenge is
details.
that our old code, and when we adopted the Uniform Development Code, because the comp plan process started on June 15th and we adopted on June 27th, we decided to continue with our old process until 2018 for the comp plan amendment section. And that had specific deadlines that really have been challenging for us. One of them is that the council has to adopt the docket by July 15th.
Right.
We didn't have an August work study meeting, and then the Planning Commission has to have their recommendation by September 15th. And so we had basically 2 months from council adopting the docket and the planning commission having to have
And that's I think that's, and I don't know whether it's possible, I don't know if the rules allow it, but I would have liked land use to have that conversation before it got to the June 15th meeting. To just say, this is how we see the comp plan moving forward, and go forth and do good work. But this is kind of, where we see it going. Because now we've got, some R20s there that we didn't have before. And is that really where we want an apartment building? The answer may be yes, but...
Yeah. And so what I was going to suggest is our new deadline for comp plan amendments is the end of the year. I think at our November meeting, we need to have it on the agenda for land use to talk about what council-sponsored amendments, if any, need to be submitted for 2018, so that when the docket goes to the city council in January or February, the land use committee has already sort of put together the package and has bought off on that.
I just want to continue with my thought from last night's meeting is we looked at the 6-year tip, and you've added the Salmonberry intersection on there. We moved that up. But it was like all of a sudden, I guess I didn't realize we were looking at the tip, and here's this tip. And the last time, we had a real robust discussion on that tip because that influences our traffic impact fees. And so we really looked at that. We spent 2 or 3 meetings at least reviewing that tip, and then all of a sudden, here it is, and this is the thing we're doing.
The driver to that was we had an aha moment here in the last month that we're gonna end up declining an application
because of that. Right. No, I appreciate all that, and I don't know that I would have changed it, but I'm just saying, as a council member, I didn't feel like I had a lot of time to do due diligence on it or know exactly what how does that impact our traffic impact fees now? Because don't they gear off of that tip?
They do, and so there were 2 projects added, and Salmonberry was already part of the Bethel project, and so Bethel was like a $33 or $36 million project. We just separated Salmonberry from Bethel and moved Salmonberry and Bethel onto the 6-year and kept the rest of it on the other amount, and it was decreased. And so in terms of our impact fee study, that project didn't change the impact fee calculation at all. Adding the new collector parallel to Sedgwick is not part of the impact fee study, which means that it would be a development improvement. But basically our ability to condition through connection on, if these couple of properties were to develop in multifamily, our ability to require that is entirely dependent on whether we've identified that improvement in our plan.
Right.
So I think that was the idea, that we were amending the comprehensive plan and creating zoning, which would likely result in development, meant that we needed to add a project to accompany that in the plan. And so those are the 2 changes. And we're not asking for this one. That's not a capacity project for us. That's an access project that we'd like to make sure goes through, rather than dead ending or relying solely on Ramsey.
And again, I don't have any problem with the end result. It was just the process to get there.
And I think you're saying that we're going to normalize our docket schedule so that we'll have this greater opportunity.
I think we need to have a... And last night, I think Mark mentioned that we're looking at our road section standards for our Public Works manual. And one of the things that I think would be really important for us to do is to actually... Right now, we have a bunch of standards, but we don't... there's like 8 arterial standards. And nowhere in any of our plans does it say that Sydney, from this point to this point, should be built to standard arterial B or arterial C. And so we really haven't programmed where those things apply. And so when somebody comes in and wants to build, storage units over on Sydney, we say, well, you need to put in frontage improvements. And it's like, well, you have 6 different standards. Which one do we use? And it's kind of, it's a guess. And usually they're going to they want the one that says optional sidewalk, optional bike lane, optional landscaping, and keep things affordable. So that's really, I think, should be a goal for next year, is once we have these new road section standards, how do we apply them? And maybe we just start with the arterials and figure out which arterial applies where.
Do those get inserted into the sub-area plan then?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I guess the last part, in terms of the sub-area planning, I think I would like to start doing outreach to individual groups of landowners based on their location relative to the center. And I'm thinking that the people who have properties south of Sedgwick, which are a handful of owners, I think it's probably a small enough group to fit everybody in this room. I'd like to start having meetings kind of with individuals and kind of hear what their thoughts are on the future development of the area and see what are our easy to plan areas and what are our difficult to plan areas.
So do you want to do that with the landowners, or do you want to do that, include developers in that? Because those landowners may not be the people developing it.
I think you want to keep the dynamics separate at that point.
Yeah, I mostly want to listen to the landowners at first, because if they're holding something with the expectation that it's going to change, that's very different than the guy who's living here and wants, is
Correct.
retired and wants to stay there for the rest of his life.
Right.
And so I think identifying, I think the area south of Sedgwick is going to be much easier to plan than the area north of Sedgwick, though I think everybody's concern north of Sedgwick, the people who seem to be opposed to development, are mostly concerned about the lack of any infrastructure. And so that's going to be a conversation more about transportation than it is maybe about the land uses. So anyway, I think that I'd like to start down that road, and as soon as we can wrap up the comp plan, we'll start on the building the toolbox. But I want to also start that conversation with the folks in this area and kind of make this our first sub area that we address.
So are there some early ideas that pop out for this area, like frontage road connectors to more of a mixed-use development facing inward? Stuff that might take the pressure off of Bethel for a stretch?
I think the Ramsey Road connector is going to be really important, especially if we start doing construction on Bethel. Building that road and having it in place before development occurs on either side of that road, so that we can divert some traffic, or if we need to set up a detour, we can, would be really important. You've got a right-of-way disconnect here where it doesn't quite go through, and there's a road there, but we don't actually have right-of-way. I think there's probably there's a legal right to use that because it's been used by the public for 40 years.
From where?
You see the white here and the white here don't connect.
Okay, so going straight through?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Larry's property.
Larry
Ramsey.
Oh, okay.
Of course it is. It's Ramsey Road.
Yeah. No, that's my, the property I talk about, my brother, his wife is a Ramsey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can you get that taken care of for us?
Eminent domain.
Yeah. So I think Ramsey is a key thing, but we've talked about the roundabout on Sedgwick and then having a connector here. I think ultimately you need another road through there to really create a grid where people are going to be able to walk through that neighborhood and have through streets where you can actually, have multiple paths to get through the area rather than having a bunch of dead-end type cul-de-sacs, which I think right now is what we would end up with if any of this develops. So I think the corridor plan really needs to also look at, maybe it's a dashed line showing that, yes, there's a connection through here. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but we need to make sure that it goes from point A to point B, and then you have a connection across.
Would that have to take vehicles, or can it be just foot and, pedestrian?
Well, we can let the community decide. I think pedestrian connectivity is really important.
I agree.
I think a lot of developers probably don't want as much traffic going through the places that they're trying to sell. So they might be resistant to that, but
the nature of development that we're talking about almost requires that.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would like to see this develop with, you've got a relatively easy grid pattern. You don't have a lot of critical areas. You could easily do alleys and more of a neighborhood feel like what we saw in High Point in a section of that where you had. Maybe if a road goes vertically here, you have a road alley, all the way up to Blueberry, and you make a very nice little neighborhood grid in there. And, I don't know. I don't think there's enough traffic that would be driving down there anyway. They could, but, it's not going to be a problem. So yeah, I think that's where we'd start is let's start talking to the group here, which includes Bravo Terrace, which is 2 owners. And then start talking to the folks that are maybe west of Ramsey and up to the Andazio and Blueberry area, And then we need to really talk to the Bethel corridor folks, which I think that's the biggest unknown for me, is I don't know who the players are. It's very fragmented ownership. It's already been partially
I don't
developed.
think there's any real players. It's a whole bunch of residential,
Right.
people that want to get bought out and
And there's no market for their property.
yeah.
Or if they
Right.
even want to get bought out, like
You're gonna
where
find
Blueberry is, they're doing all that work on Jim
Yeah.
McCary's property.
Yeah, so this is...
And
Farmland.
and he runs cattle there.
I think you're gonna find a mix of both.
So Mark's given me some of his best work here. It says, being fed by humans is not good for me.
Is that a
You know
seagull?
what?
It's a seagull.
Oh, yeah, it is.
We can have a little school competition for this.
Well, no,
Have the-
Mark's nailed it here.
Yeah, that's what made me think of like an elementary kid drawing.
Maybe we should get a no flock of seagulls sign as well.
Oh,
No
that's bad.
flock.
I should have kept my mouth shut.
We're adjourned at 8:52.